Okay, well, welcome everyone. I don't want anyone who's waiting. I want to be respectful of your time for those who joined on time. The others can join a little later. So just welcome once again, everyone. My name is Deborah Araujo. I'm the founder and CEO of ClinBiz, and it's really a great pleasure to be hosting this webinar alongside with Strategicon Pharma and this amazing panel of industry executives here from the CRO side, which is going to be a very interesting conversation. So super happy to be hosting here for everyone. And just before I pass along to our amazing moderator as well, just a few of housekeeping items. If you have any questions, I think most everyone here should be very familiar with Zoom at this point. But just in case you're not, you can always submit any of your questions on the chat function. So there's a little icon for chat. You can simply submit there throughout the conversation. And our moderator, Jean Hecht, is going to be getting any of the questions there, and at the end as well, if they are not able to address it during the conversation. Okay, if there's any issues with audio, you obviously can just get in again, and hopefully that will solve the issue. So without further ado, I'm super excited to be introducing here Jean Hecht. I hope I said it right, Jean. We were going over how to pronounce her last name here. Very fun last name. She's from GHT Consulting, and Jean will be able to give you a lot more information on her background, an amazing industry executive. And she's going to be leading and moderating this discussion on some industry changes, particularly as they are affecting and impacting the RFP and the budgeting process from a CRO perspective, which is so important for us to hear the perspective of the stakeholder in the industry. So without further ado, Jean, the floor is all yours. And I'm just going to be in the background if anyone needs me.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited about my esteemed colleagues here on the panel. I'm going to start first, just by way of background, been in the industry for over 25 years, and I'm the CEO and founder of JTH Consulting. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn and connect with me, and happy to continue to expand my network and share insights on the industry with all of you. I want to first have each of my panelists introduce themselves, and so you can understand the breadth and depth of experience that sits on this panel before we get into the conversation. So let's start with Daryl.
Sure. Hi, I'm Daryl Fallon. I'm the Vice President of Proposal Development at Premier Research, and I've been in the industry almost 30 years. Most of that's been in proposal development.
Great. I know you've seen a lot. Jason, let's turn it next to you.
Thanks, Jean. Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Casarella, Executive Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at Advanced Clinical. We're a global full-service CRO, and I've been in the CRO industry for 24 years.
Wonderful. Mike.
Good afternoon and greetings from Ireland, everybody. My name is Mike Ryan. I'm Executive Vice President for Eversana in Europe. We work in the commercialization space, but still, obviously, do a lot of costing. Started my career in proposal development in par excel about 25 years ago, and I've held various positions in Inventive now, Syneos, PPD, and TrialSpark in New York.
Wonderful. Kathleen.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Kathleen Kane-Tremmel. I am an independent consultant. I've been in the industry for about 28 years now and have worked for both large global CROs such as ICON to most recently, I was Vice President of Business Development at a startup, DMED Target Health.
Wonderful. And let's round it out with Tracy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Hudson. I've been in the industry for, like Daryl, almost 30 years. I have a background with a split on the pharma side. So I spent about 20 years as the head of clinical outsourcing in different pharmaceutical companies before coming to the CRO side. I'm currently the Vice President of Proposals and RFIs for Syneos Health, where I target primarily strategic customers and content. Let's just call it content and knowledge management.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for doing such great introductions. I hope that everyone who joined the webinar was able to read the description. And in the description, we discussed about the need to be adaptable and also efficient in the development of proposals and budgets. So I want to start though, before we get into kind of the future trends and what this esteemed panel is seeing as the industry evolves. Let's start first with a couple basics. So Tracy, I'm going to start with you. What tools do you guys currently use to support your budget development process? Can you help maybe level set a little bit with those listening in?
Yep. So I wish that I could say, we have this unique, great automated, finalized, super fancy tool. We don't. We use a budget platform on Excel. It has varying degrees of automation depending on the type of response that we are providing. So, but again, an Excel platform with variation.
Awesome. And Daryl, is your platform similar, your approach similar? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think like everybody has at some point in their career, we use Excel as well. For us, we don't have any real automation built in. It's a complex spreadsheet. We have also, because it doesn't, Excel's not a database. We've built a tool in a platform called Planning Analytics, excuse me, that we can upload information so we can do more manipulation, we can stack studies and things like that. And then we've programmed, and we're still sort of, in the early stages of it, programmed some benchmarking reports and things like that in Salesforce, where we track all our sales data, so that we can do like historical checking and research and things like that. But basically, we're Excel.
Great. So it sounds like all of us spent a lot of time in those fantastic spreadsheets. Let's talk a little bit about the process. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you. From creation to review to approval, can you help the audience here understand from a CRO perspective, what's the typical bid process? What does it look like within an organization?
Sure, Gene. So I think our process is fairly typical or fairly common to other CROs. Our business development team is really focused on right fit conversations with our clients and really how we can help their business. So once an RFP arrives, we really should have sufficient background on that client, the opportunity, their goals, and really how our organization could be the best fit for that client. So we have an internal review of the materials shared by the client, and we really, again, determine if there is the right fit, whether or not we will bid. In most cases, we do, because our business development team is qualifying the right types of opportunities, but sometimes we'll go back and ask some clarifying questions before we can commit whether or not we'll go forward. If we do go forward, in some cases, we'll do a credit check, we'll do a D&B review of the client. Again, we're trying to de-risk the situation as best as possible. But then we have internal strategy discussions. We really talk about our functional leadership, how would we approach conducting the study today, and then build out our proposed budget and response and the team and the relevant experience and ideas for really maximizing the outcome of the study. We like to engage with the client several times during the process to really make sure that we're building this collaboratively. And then we have some internal reviews and sign off based on size and complexity of the final deliverables, and then we send it out the door. So fairly common that I think you would hear from most CROs today.
Great. So we started first with the fact that Excel is somewhat of the tool currently used across industry. We also heard from Jason about the process. Let's now reflect on the past with an eye on the future. And let me ask the first question, and this will go to Kathleen to start. Do you see different requests from customers based on where they are in their buying journey? And then what strategies do you and teams employ to address this?
So thanks for that question, Jean. I would say that absolutely, I see different RFP requests coming in, maybe not so much where they are in their buying journey, but maybe where they are in their outsourcing journey or even their journey as an organization. So you have much larger global pharma companies that have sophisticated processes that are in place to a point where they are actually directing the CRO step by step what steps they need to take, what their timeline is, what spreadsheet or bid grid has to be completed, and perhaps even the format of the proposal text itself. So you'll have ones that are quite sophisticated and give you detailed direction. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where you have small startup companies that have never really issued a paper RFP, if you will, via email. They just have an idea, and they know they need to run a clinical trial, but they may not know all of the services that are required and the specifications within each of those services in order to first and foremost generate a budget. So that has been my experience, that I see it across the board, varying degrees of preparedness and RFP completion and format for that matter. So it's very different from company to company. I would say some of the strategies that we've employed to address it, certain companies have actually put together documents, templates to help the sponsor company complete it so that it is in a more orderly, organized fashion so that we can address it. So a little bit of hand holding and guiding from the CRO side to get the sponsor company where they need to be in order for us to generate a quality proposal that meets their expectations or answers their key questions. To other strategies where it's ad hoc. You know, you may need to have one solution that's going to fit one particular sponsor and another that's going to fit someone else. We actually have, for instance, the global large pharma companies I've seen where we've created dedicated resources to support the RFPs coming in from those large pharma companies, so that we are able to turn it around very quickly, especially if they have unique requests, such as, can you tell us which countries we should go to? Where are we going to find the patients? You know, it's a blank sheet of paper. It's up to you as our experts to tell us and lead us which direction we need to go, which is time consuming. So we'll take care of that as well. So I think, you know, it's not a one size strategy fits all. It's very customized based on the particular RFP, the particular study, the particular patients that are involved, and obviously the sponsor.
Great. Tracy, what do you think? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly as Kathleen said. I also think it's a little bit of what Jason said, right? So we look when the opportunity comes in the door for what's the right fit. So that first step at triage will then lead us to what's the best way to respond, whether that is a small to mid customer and their, you know, buying requirements are different than a strategic customer where we're embedded in their process, totally different ends of the spectrum. We tend to think about our responses as it relates to how much engagement we have with the customer, how much information, background information, what's their itch that we're trying to scratch, kind of a thing. So we definitely align our responses, whether it's the detail in the budget or the detail of the opportunity in text support or the narrative form that we're providing. We align that to the journey itself. Not everything, as Kathleen said, is created equal. So what we instead try to do is to use or to give some of that predictive analysis information. And we do try to be a little bit disruptive, right? So what we find is some of the smaller customers, they've hired a consultant, they want, you know, everything sliced and diced in 700 different ways, right? So that they can now, because it's become a procurement exercise, when in fact it really isn't at the procurement stage yet. It's really about choosing the right partner to go forward. So we look for how to respond in that partnership and take it as an opportunity then to teach, educate, and go on that collaborative journey with them, right? We do have dedicated resources. We do try to move away from procurement practices where possible, because I do think you get more information when you start to get away from X's and O's. I think the more sophisticated the customer, right, the more they want to get to X's and O's. But I think the opportunity lies in aligning how you're responding, the level of detail you're giving based on where they are in that journey and what itch they're trying to scratch. So we do definitely try to right size that, on every single opportunity. Not everything is created equal.
Well, thank you both for sharing. I'm going to hit the pause button for a quick second, and we're going to let you guys all get a breath and take a sip of water perhaps. And I'm going to ask the audience. So Deborah, let's launch that first poll.
Okay, you should have it on your screen there. So we'll give it a few seconds for some answers to come in, and then we'll share the results. We have about 60% participated. All right, let's get just a few more seconds. Okay, I think we're coming to stable. So we'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Awesome.
You should have the results.
Great. So it does seem somewhat of a satisfied group to dissatisfied. It does seem like there is a nice or good group of the population that are dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. So thank you all for sharing that information. We got a great question in, actually. So I want to thank Rob, who submitted a question on the chat box. And I'm going to actually ask that question of Jason and Mike. and it'll lead into our next question as well. But Rob asked, given the great variability of maturity in the industry, so we all know, there's the 2 guys in a folding table and a computer to really established large pharma. What tips can you give for sponsor companies on what a great RFP looks like? So we'll start with Mike and then we'll go to Jason.
Well, it's always a pleasure getting a question from Rob Aitchison, I have to say. One of the very first projects I was ever awarded was by Rob and his team down in Pfizer back in 1552 BC. What does a great RFP look like? I will be controversial and say it doesn't look much like many of the RFPs I've seen over the last 10 or 15 years. Whilst I really agree strongly with Tracy's point that we're getting in a lot more RFPs with a lot more X's and O's. What I worry about is we get in these highly complex documents to fill out that take up a valuable amount of time just in ensuring we are answering compliantly, and takes away a lot of the time around creativity. To my mind, a CRO, and why I joined the service industry, is a CRO should offer infinite solutions. It should be able to consider all sorts of solutions, irrespective of past history with certain clients and so on and so forth. And as a result, it should create what is a unique solution, because every clinical trial, particularly these days, should be a unique solution. There is no way of doing the same trial over and over again. There's different technologies that can be applied, etc. So to my mind, a great RFP is really a short document followed by a process where, as Jason described, there's the opportunity for ongoing dialogue to determine what truly the problem that the client faces as they're looking for an outsourcing partner, not what a series of questions that have been put together by committee look like in historic and based on historic precedent. So a very simple document followed by a series of meetings where the key decision makers can speak to the business development team and the operational teams in the CROs. To me, that's what a great RFP looks like. And it's not a big Word document. And might I just add on to that, a great proposal isn't a big Word document either. It's a short, succinct document that describes those unique solutions that we as a CRO can offer to meet the unique challenges of that particular clinical trial at that particular moment in time.
Awesome. Jason, anything to add?
I think Mike hit all the key points, and I agree with all of them. But I would just say the more information, the better. The willingness to have a conversation and not feel as though you have to race against the clock and get it all done in 10 days. Invite the conversation with your potential partners and look to them for their ideas and feedback, and allow them to provide that type of creativity and make sure that it's an ongoing discussion. So I can't suggest or recommend it has to document, RFP has to look a certain way. I think there just has to be openness to have a conversation.
Great. There was a question in the chat, but I'm not able to survey the audience, which said, for those who are satisfied with your current tool, what are you using? And I like the chat that's happened. So if some of those on the call want to look at the chat and respond to George, that would be wonderful, because I'm not able to survey the audience. But let's go into the next question for the panelists. It says, over the years, we all know that sponsor companies have professionalized outsourcing and procurement departments. And Jason, I'm going to start with you. They've started requesting their CRO partners provide a lot of supporting documentation, such as RACIs, detailed breakdowns of resources by effort, by location, et cetera. Do you feel that the process has improved over the years? Yes or no? If yes or no, why not? How are you guys handling these new requests? And are there any other trends and information requests that you're also seeing? And is that negatively or positively impacting the buying and selling process?
Okay. Yeah, from my perspective, I'm not sure that it's improved the process. And I have some thoughts around this. My view and my thinking about this is that type of highly detailed approach has created a great deal of commoditization, which really has prevented CROs from standing out from one another. And I think Tracy had a great point. At the bidding stage, it's still really about selling and differentiating. It's not really about what the future may or may not hold. And I think that this type of commoditization approach really devalues each organization and really devalues their strengths of really what is going to make them stand out as the partner. And that is often not welcome at this stage, and it's somewhat discouraging to CROs. So it's clinical research. As we all know, there's constant changes. This isn't like getting a quote for a landscaping project in your backyard. How many bushes, how many trees, how long will it take? Here's the price. It doesn't work that way, and I think we all know that. I think if the goal is a true partnership, and the approach is that we come to the table as equals, and as Mike said, a valued contributor, this type of highly detailed approach often feels like a sponsor is seeing how high that CRO is going to jump. And if they want it badly enough, they'll jump high and provide more information. I think something that we hear often from clients is that they don't like cookie cutter proposals. But in this approach, you basically hand the CROs the cutter and say, if you don't follow the framework, you're not going to be considered. So that's something that we've seen. And I think the number-driven approach, how many of these and how many of these resources in this time really leaves out the most important aspect of clinical research, and that's the business engagement centered around people. Who are the people that are going to get this study done? What skills do they bring to the table, and how to best conduct the clinical trial? So one other trend that I think we've seen is just requests for free advice, site lists, feasibility, patient engagement strategies, resourcing plans, basically asking CROs to provide ideas to optimize a study without any kind of commitment whatsoever. And there's certain information that's being requested, I think, a little bit too early in the process. And then finally, I would add that an additional negative is really lack of access to the real decision makers in the process and the people that have the right information needed to provide clarity. The process that you described, Gene, feels very much like a firewall, which is complete the information in this format by 5 p.m. on Friday. Don't ask us any questions. We're not going to get on the phone with you. It just feels very one-sided. So I think that we still have a ways to go as an industry to improve that.
Absolutely.
Great. Kathleen, anything to add from your end?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I would like to add to all the things that Jason said, I completely agree. I think the CROs always want to get involved early on, prior to RFP completion, prior to protocol completion, so that we truly can partner with regards to the viability of the conduct of that study. And that, I think, definitely still needs to evolve. We're not there yet. And maybe that's just the degree or the stage of partnership between the CRO and the sponsor company. But I do think that that takes a little bit of a leap of faith for the sponsor companies to invite their CRO partners to join in early on and to really be part of the scientific strategy, not just the tactical operationalization of the services that are required to implement their study. So that's one thing I wanted to add.
Great, thank you. There is a question that came into the from the audience, but I just wanted to do a raise of hands of the panelists. Are there any of you on this panel that use something other than Excel for doing your current budgeting? Okay, so I think just there was a question from Vladimir. So Vladimir, the panelists are currently using Excel for their clinical trial budgeting. We're going to move on to the next question is, and we'll start, Mike, with you. And I know you might have answered this in a way a little bit when we answered the question from Rob, but what do you see as some of the blockers, the biggest blockers in providing a thoughtful, comprehensive proposal and budget?
The biggest blocker is trust, I think. And even you know, in arrangements where there's preferred providerships, everybody is trying to keep their cards close at all times. And I've always had a sort of an opinion that, and it was unpopular in some CROs, but I have no issue going into the detail of what a project costs or how I've resourced a project, because I'm a CRO. I'm expert at doing that, right? That is my function. Of CRO, one of the things that's always, I suppose, concerned me a little bit in their industry is we in pharma and we in CROs have the same job titles. We have project managers, we have CRAs, etc. But the function of a CRO is to track and monetize time. The function of a pharmaceutical company is to develop and commercialize a drug. As a result of that, CROs are experts at tracking time. That's what we do. Our time tracking starts on the very moment that we start creating these budgets, whether it be in Clinical Maestro or in Excel or whatever it may be. But we're all reluctant to share the data at times, you know, how we built our algorithms, etc. And, you know, equally, and I talked about the pharma side of things, not wanting to share the sorts of details or allow us be as creative as we need to be. I think the CROs at times can be accused of being a little bit too hidden with their algorithms and so on. Their algorithms are their core way of understanding and costing their business. So I would argue that there needs to be a much greater degree of trust so that we can have these detailed conversations, not only about the strategy, but then ultimately what the strategy, or indeed what the client has specifically requested as deal breakers. If you don't do this, then we will do the following, or we will not award you the work. We've all got to build up a much greater degree of trust so that a number of things occur. Number one, we develop better strategies for studies. Number two, we're not getting to a situation where studies are awarded and the poor old operational team are being awarded a study and they're already behind in their budget from the second it's awarded. And number three, ultimately, we all have to understand, as a friend of mine used to put it, and I've got to be very careful with my pronunciation here, shift happens. There is going to be movement. I believe the number that I saw when I was working Medidata, on average, protocols change 8 times during the early stages of the implementation of a clinical trial. And if anybody thinks that that's not going to affect a budget one way or another, then that's naive, quite frankly. And I think had we had all of that trust initially, had we had the discussions initially that allowed a much more robust way of understanding what the protocol is ultimately going to look like, a lot of the other trust-related issues that come from change orders, etc., would disappear. So in summary, simple word, difficult concept, trust.
Great. Hey, Daryl, why don't you chime in for a second, and then we're going to ask Jason to share some thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to, when Mike said trust, I wanted to, quick story. Years ago, we got an RFP, and I don't know if we misread it or it was a bit vague, but it sounded like the customer said, here's our study, here's our goal, and we have, you know, $5 million. So what's your proposal for us? And the feeling, like, you could hear the crowds cheering, right? Like, yes, we can put together whatever we want, you know, and ultimately it turned out that that was not what they were saying. And so, you know, there was no trust to share that budget, that we would, if we didn't need, say, $5 million, you know, that we would build it up to that. But the idea that we were trusted enough to say, here's my budget, what can I get? And we could put in, you know, here's this great strategy and so on and so forth. here's maybe some options or whatever. It was for a while there, the dream of a proposal writer to have that kind of experience.
Exactly. Definitely, to understand the goal line is super important and how you're going to be measured. Jason, any thoughts or additional thoughts from you?
I think Mike and Daryl hit a lot of them. The only other couple points I would make, in addition to the trust and the transparency and the dialogue, two other things. Time. I know that the industry gold standard has always been about 10 working days. We actually measure this. We've seen it get a little bit smaller than that. We've seen closer to an average of 8 days. So as more and more information is requested, doing it in less and less amount of time is going to certainly sacrifice quality. And again, rush or prevent that sort of meaningful dialogue during the process. The more information that's requested, clearly we need more time to do that. And then lastly, with regard to just some of the numbers that we had addressed a little bit earlier, very specific strategies, all of those tend to focus on price. Yeah. And price and cost are two very different things. And my understanding, or at least my approach, has been at the evaluation stage, it's really not as much about price as it's going to be about how will this study be done in the best possible way, on time, with the highest quality. So I think putting some of those other ideas on the table, what are you really trying to achieve through the RFP process? We've had some clients say, we want to just validate our planned enrollment rate. Well, we can do that, but we don't have to develop a full budget for that. So let's have that discussion early on. What is your goal? How are we helping your business? And if we have clarity as a partner at the table, then I think that's the best use of everyone's time.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I think we'd all have to be hiding in closets or in a bubble to not see all the M&A activity going on in the CRO industry. And we know that it's had a massive impact on the development of budgets, bringing two companies, two processes, two systems, two tools together. For all of us that have lived it, we understand just how challenging that can be. So when we think about our ability to integrate and perhaps some of the downstream effects that come after the merger or the acquisition has transpired, there can oftentimes be an impact on the ability to thoughtfully respond in now a combined manner even to a customer. So Daryl, I know that your organization's recently experienced some of these types of transactions. Do you want to share your thoughts on how you're handling this and maybe where there's pain points that exist?
Sure. So our situation is having recently made a couple of acquisitions in a short period of time with companies who are somewhat different, who have added a certain, added expertise that we did not have. And so what we're trying to do is not fix anything that isn't broken. So when you're integrating how we're pricing things and the budgeting, our work is similar enough that you think, okay, let's put it all together and you can use our tool and so on and so forth. But meanwhile, you have to make sure that what they were doing, which is somewhat different and an expertise we didn't have, that we're not all of a sudden giving customers a totally different kind of pricing than they were doing. So what we want is one tool. What we may not be able to do is one tool. The funny thing I wanted to mention is that in meeting with our counterparts in the new acquisitions, everyone said, oh, we hate our tool. And so across the board, it was like, oh, we just wanted to know where we're going to rebuild our tool. So we want to try to put it all together, meanwhile, not disrupt the flow of business. From the sponsor side, I don't know about everybody else's experience, but it seems to me within several days of acquiring a new company, the sponsors want to requalify. And so now we have the massive RFI where we haven't quite integrated yet. So it's difficult to figure out how do you want this answered. We also worry about the impact, the customers worrying about the impact of the integration. So again, you have massive changes you have to make because everybody does things, proposal development, bid development, the process is very similar. The tools are very different because most of us are using Excel. You want to get it integrated as fast as possible, but you can't disrupt the business.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate that. And I do think this is when CROs want to beg of the pharma customers a little bit of patience, especially as you're integrating and working through how you're going to stitch together your operations and your associated response to customers. So let's also talk a little bit about we've talked about mergers and acquisitions and the challenges and opportunities that come from the integration of those. Then there's a number of new processes, systems, industry trends, and how we're evolving operations. So risk-based monitoring, remote monitoring, virtual trials, hybrid trials, all of those require thoughtful consideration by the CRO when pulling together a really robust strategy, and then obviously the associated costs. So a question we'll start first with Kathleen is, what are the strategies you use to keep up with these changes? And what are the associated costing requirements? And maybe, what are some challenges that you're seeing?
So what I've seen throughout the industry is some of the strategies that they employ is to make sure, first and foremost, that they understand what the sponsor is really requesting. So they'll have to, understand, do they understand the definition of the industry trends as we understand them? Are we speaking the same language, first and foremost? So again, it goes back to having that dialogue with the sponsor to ensure that we're on the same page with one another. And then once that's in place, I think that the qualitative portion of our feedback and our proposal is strategy. How are we going to actually implement this so that we reach the right patients at the right location, whether it's at home or at sites, within the time frame that you need in order to meet whatever it is your objective, whatever you're going to do with that data for a filing, maybe with the FDA or some other global regulatory agency, or just for a publication. So we have to take so many factors into consideration, but all of that is understood through that dialogue. And I think that's really the biggest strategy is around communication, making sure that we have the right people at the table on our side at the CRO, and that we're speaking to the decision makers on the sponsor side, those that can actually decide, okay, we're going to do remote monitoring for this, or we're going to use home health instead for this. We're not actually going to have patients go to the sites and do a decentralized clinical trial. And then there's a whole caveat of other factors that come into play with regards to, okay, if we're going to move in that direction, what tools, what technologies do we need to employ in order to implement that? And do we have those tools? Do we as the CRO have them in-house, or do we need to look for a solution outside and have a partner in that space? And then from a bidding perspective, I really think that comes down to whatever tool it is that you're using, it has to be flexible enough to be able to be customized in particular for that specific need. So, again, it goes back to probably my earlier comment that in our industry as the CRO, we're the service provider. So we are the ones that have to be nimble, that have to be flexible, and we will not have, one size fits all, because we want to work with a variety of different sponsors. We want to be able to support them. Of course, there may be specific indications or therapeutic areas in general that we specialize in, but at the end of the day, we want to put our customers' needs first. So those are some of the strategies that I've seen employed in support of the industry trends. And when it comes to bidding, again, I have seen where there's been a ton of customization and perhaps even sometimes a new costing tool, a new mini Excel spreadsheet developed to answer that particular request.
Just what we need, more Excel. Mike, thoughts from you?
Well, I'm a big technology fan. I think as an industry, to say that we have failed at implementing technology in the rollout of clinical trials is the greatest understatement that even I could make. For those of us that went through the EDC wars of '02 and whatever, getting clients to move from paper to EDC or even further back in the day to written character recognition, all of that sort of stuff. It was painful, it took a long time, and so on. In recent times, I look at risk-based monitoring, and I will be frank, I have never in my career seen either a good proposal for risk-based monitoring or indeed a good RFP for risk-based monitoring. And again, I think some of that is down to the fact that we're just not thinking the right way. One thing CROs do not have is a crystal ball. And the whole premise of risk-based monitoring was always that we were looking at a way of focusing only on those sites that needed extra attention, and those sites that were performing well didn't need focus. And we went about it the wrong way, I suppose, in some respects. We all saw it as a cost saving. It's not a cost saving, it's a quality improvement measure. But we then found it very difficult to cost it because we are fixated for whatever reason on fixed budgets, on making sure that we have full transparency on how much is going to be required for every month of every year of every clinical trial. And folks, that's a fallacy. None of your other service providers are doing that. None of your accountancy firms are working that way. None of your marketing firms are working that way. Yet you're expecting a CRO in the space of 10 working days to create a cost that should last for 3 years. And, is supposed to take into account every eventuality. For example, the COVID crisis that we've just had. Boy, oh boy, is that the biggest change order that's ever going to ultimately hit our industry. So what everybody's got to do is take a step back from this idea of commoditizing clinical trials, creating an environment where, it's fixed price and so on, and understand that, as my first ever lecturer in my university said to me, biology isn't a set of black and whites, it's a series of grays. So what we've got to do, to my mind at least, is embrace future technology, but understand those technologies, those methodologies that we employ can ultimately lead to variable costs. Some of those costs will go up, some of them will go down. Again, going back to the previous message, if you're trustful, you're working well with your partner, you will understand that, and you will understand the benefit of those changes as you go along and as you evolve your strategy. So again, in summary, flexibility is the key thing that I would say to everybody going forward. Should be the thing that you'd be thinking about in terms of your process and in addressing a lot of the challenges we face as an industry now.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's pause for a second so we can all take a sip of water or have a breather. And Deborah, I'm going to turn it to you for the next polling question.
Okay, you should see coming on your screen now for poll number 2. And so we'll give it a few seconds for everyone to provide. And if you're able to, please select 3 on the multiple choice. That will give us some more robust insight into what you're thinking. Okay, we have about 20%. We'll give a little longer just because it's 3 of them. Okay, about 50%. I think we're stabilizing at this point. So we'll give it 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Awesome. Great. Lack of historical bid database. Interesting. Lack of standardization. Accuracy and reliability, too labor intensive. Great. Thank you everyone for sharing those. I think we all are nodding our heads because those are definitely challenges and issues that resonate with all of us. So let's move. We're all tenured. I did like a little bit of math, and I didn't want to say over 180 years of experience because that makes it sound really old. So I said, I'm going to say over 150 years of combined experience. And we've seen a lot. Right. And I think this group would be really fun to go out and have a drink with, coffee or otherwise, and to hear and to share our battle scars at some point in time. So let's talk though about the future, right? The future is bright. We want, I don't know if we want to work another combined 180 years. I think that's a lot, but I think we have a real opportunity here to shape the future. So Mike, from your perspective, what do you see as some opportunities for improving processes as we move into the future, specifically around bidding and the proposal process?
I see the idea of shared costing tools as maybe a way of working this. And this isn't me trying to promote one costing tool or another, because there are multiple costing tools out there, folks. But I like the idea of both the sponsor and the CRO being able to work on a budgetary tool that allows, I suppose, the elimination of that needless sort of upfront lack of trust. I would very much like companies, and sponsors in particular, to understand the motivations behind the costings of the CROs. Number two, I suppose, and this isn't necessarily technology driven per se, but I'd really like a lot more focus on the people that are being proposed for clinical trials. It always amazes me that we go in, we do a 2-hour bid defense, and the project manager or the project director is interviewed during that 2-hour process. And the project is often awarded on that 2-hour process, and the said individual is the linchpin for a $100 million proposal. What I don't see as the future, but I've seen as a massive trend in recent times, and apologies to those maybe on the call that have espoused this, but I've now been seeing more virtual bid defense meetings. I know some of that was necessary from COVID, but I'd seen it prior to COVID. I honestly don't understand how anybody can feel that we can develop a good and immediate working relationship with a group of people who are responsible for one of the most important pieces of work that your company is undertaking. I would much rather much more detailed meeting with you so that you can meet the people that you're potentially working with for this. And ultimately, I think that leads to better understanding down the road. And finally, I do think that there is an important way up between compliance and technology. I understand that there's always concerns about rolling out new technology. But again, folks, if you look at every other industry out there and the changes that technology have brought about in a short period of time, and we are still dealing with paper protocols, for example, where the shift from A4 to A3 was one of the biggest technological shifts we've seen in the last 10 years in the execution of clinical trials, then by golly, we're doing things wrong, right? There are wonderful technologies out there. There are wonderful startup companies out there. Give these companies a break. Let them try and work their technology within your organization. Stop this, we're trying to limit to 5 vendors. Get people in, look and see what's out there from a technology perspective. There's incredible stuff going on. And if we don't adopt it, all we're going to do is keep following up in the same vicious circle that we've been seeing over the last 20 years. And by the way, 150, 180, I'm not sure what the difference is, but I still feel old.
Same here. I can start to see it here on me. One of the things that I was thinking about is I was telling the panelists that the last 2 days I was attending a conference, the CNS Summit. It was a great conference. And in that, they talked a lot about different technologies. And those technologies are coming in and being written into many clinical development programs and associated protocols. And we're seeing these technologies, be it, around patient engagement, around site identification, health, video and voice biomarkers. We're seeing it as it relates to digitization of protocols, you name it. There's a lot of really interesting things out there. And as the technology and the use of technology, continues to evolve, and as there's the first users versus the first followers, or early adopters versus the first followers, what how are you guys perhaps bringing technology into the budgeting, the proposal, the costing process? And I'll start maybe first with Daryl, and if you can share a little bit about, are you guys at the proposal pricing costing process bringing any technology in to help you scale, especially as you continue to acquire?
So yeah, I think everybody would agree that you're constantly looking for what new technology could help the process. As everybody's discussed, we're tight for time and so on and so forth. I think the big thing is, one of the big things is the complexity of the very different ways that we, yeah, as clinical trials evolve and the various, whether it's vendors or new capabilities or new technology that clinical trials are using, the complexity of all of that is difficult for it's hard to make a decision on technology because you need to be so incredibly flexible. But I think you have to keep an open mind and keep looking because we have to be scalable. I think I don't know about everybody else, but if your company grows 20%, your proposal development staff doesn't usually grow 20%. So you have to figure out how to be as efficient as possible until you get that bump of growing your staff. I think the other thing is, which is, again, as proposal development sort of follows the evolving clinical trials, and that we also need to be really, cognizant, I guess, of the power of data. The more you look at the stuff that you're doing, the more you realize how much data is in one of those budget files that could be used for so many different things, and tell you a lot that you're not seeing because you're using separate files. And then the last thing that we're always thinking about, and obviously is more and more and more to the forefront of people's minds, is the security. And this data security and the security of your tools is something that we have to think about as well. So for all of those reasons, I think you have to be constantly looking at what technology is out there.
Great. Kathleen, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think Daryl brings up memories of security issues, and even probably many of you have had late nights putting together budgets, and all of a sudden the system crashes and you've just lost everything you've worked on. So I think that from a technology perspective too, it's going to behoove all of us, right, to work in that direction, to think about all of the challenges, perhaps our most catastrophic experiences that we've had putting together proposals in our past, and try to come up with solutions from a technology and a people perspective to address them. I've been fortunate in that I have used Maestro, and we were actually building a customized global costing tool with our colleagues. And I would say that software as a solution in support of putting together a budget is very helpful in that it's speed. Time is money, both for the CRO and the sponsor side. We were able to put together budgets within minutes versus multiple days. So that was really helpful. I think one of our biggest challenges were algorithms and getting everybody to agree on what the algorithms should be by task or by resource. And that's an area where I think back to Mike's point, talking about a standardized tool, that's kind of nirvana for us. If we could have something where we agree from a standardized technology to the actual components that reside within that technology as an industry, I think that that would put all of us in a much better place. Not to say that we're not going to have nuances across the board. We will. That's inevitable because we're all our own companies and our own entities with our own goals to achieve. But if there are certain areas that we could agree on standardizing, I think that would already be one step forward.
Great. Awesome. So we only have a couple minutes left. There is a question from Rob. I do want to ask him that question, or ask that question for him to the panelists. That says, for the buyers, the explosion of technology is very difficult. And as the buyers struggle to understand the value versus the cost, how can you help them understand this difference so that they can feel confident about the purchase and recommending this spend to their organizations? So Tracy, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I actually saw that question. I began to think about it a little bit. I think it goes back to some of the items that Mike spoke to, right? The minute we take it away from a commodity and turn it into what is the value proposition, right? So I think about, procurement being, You want good purchasing practices. I completely appreciate that. I think that what's happened is we've turned it into how, like, we're choosing where we save the most money and not where we're getting the most value. And I think if you turn the conversation away from the commodity, you know, and turn it more instead of what's the value proposition, and try to instead think about it as in that partnership way, get back to the trust, then you can easily, you know, answer that question and turn it into, how do I recommend this purchasing decision to my customer or to my, you know, my management? Because now you have, you know, more strategic tangibles that you can point to besides price point.
Yeah, great. We're running low on time. I want to let Jason get the last word and say before we go into a final polling. So please, everyone, hold on. But based on the discussion today, Jason, any thoughts on where strategic con should focus? You saw the earlier polls. Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, and that as a company, we have used it a few times in bids. We don't have it as our, in full transparency, we don't have it as our pricing tool. But I think a couple of the themes that we've talked about today is just that openness to flexibility. Invite companies that are using the platform to also have an opportunity to differentiate themselves and provide some real strategies and ideas for running the trial beyond that of resourcing and timeline and budgets and pricing, and let those bidders really tell their story to really show how they're going to make an impact.
Awesome. So let's go with our third and final polling question. And so, awesome. Which of the following enhancements would you find the most valuable to drive efficiencies in responding to RFPs?
All right, just a few more seconds. Thanks everyone for participating. All right, we'll do 2%. We'll do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think we're good.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing that. Before we close out today, there is going to be a link that Deborah will share in a second to a longer poll that should you complete, Strategicon will share that data. So it's in the chat function. It should take you maybe 5-7 minutes to complete. Please feel free to do so. When you do so, like I said, Strategicon will share with you the aggregated data that might be something of interest for you within your organization. We're about to head off here on the East Coast to lunch. I know that Mike is getting ready for perhaps a dinner time or an evening nip, as my father would call it. Those on the West Coast, it's time for a cup of coffee to get you through the rest of your day. And if you're in Asia, thank you so much for listening in, because it's bedtime for you, or past my bedtime. So Deborah, I'm going to turn it back over to you and thank all of my panelists.
Yeah, same here. Thank you all the panelists for this wonderful discussion. Thank you for everyone joining. Just a last minute thing, we are also going to have Strategicon reach out to you with the recording in case you maybe missed a couple of parts of it, of this wonderful discussion. I know some people weren't able to join live. So we'll definitely be reaching out with the recording. Thank you again to all the panelists, and thanks everyone for joining this wonderful discussion. All right, thank you. I'll see you next time.
All right, take care, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye.